Hi, this is Emily the Songbird, and I am deeply grateful today for my guest. Dr. Mehring is my guest today, and he has 30 years of experience in treating the mind-body connection in his practice. He has a doctor of chiropractic. He is a doctor of chiropractic, and he also has a master's degree in psychology and philosophy, and does hypnotherapy and homeopathy. And he works it all together in a big soup called E3. He created a technique called E3, which is emotional energetic evolution, a formula to change chaos into peace.
Love it. Well done.
How'd I do there, Dr. Mehring?
Great.
You can see that I have fun here, yes?
Right.
All right. Well, I'm so grateful to have you here. Our paths crossed just a few months ago, yes? Right. And it was very exciting to discover you as you were traveling through your 41 states and showing beautiful pictures of your adventure, right? So you were doing healing of a different sort. And I thought that would actually be a fun place to start. The adventure of being alive. I kind of like that title because I think that's what you were really doing. And to me, the adventure of being alive is the most healing experience that we could have. I don't know, it just somehow feels like when all our cells are really vibrating in full expression and we know we're conscious of being alive, right? The scene in the back has the vibrancy of the sky, not real, but virtual, the sky and the ocean and all of that, and helps remind me of how beautiful it is, this experience of being alive. So would you like to share a little bit about that adventure?
Well, yeah, the adventure took off wildly when my best friend from college was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And so I was going down and spending a lot of time with him, cooking the right foods and helping him with all sorts of things that needed to help him be more in comfort. And so I did this for about 7-8 months, going down there regularly. And seeing him in the process of life really triggered me to this defining moment when you really realize that life isn't forever, and that it's so important to really go after everything that you want to do. And in the COVID crisis, right, here we are. So I went off and bought a trailer and started traveling around and doing all sorts of different trips and going on cruises to Hawaii or to Alaska and Hawaii and just living it up. So 41 states, 8 months. It's the most traveling I'll probably ever do in my life. It's interesting what I came to in that is that there's a hypnosis that we're in, I think, when we're in our daily life. And when you're in nature, you break out of that. And I think we actually get to more of a direct contact with that soul consciousness. So there was also a journey in it of spending time alone, walking on trails, mountain biking. I threw the mountain bike on the back of the trailer and, kind of found my destiny to where I could be out and mountain biking, meeting people, seeing nature, always feeling so in the hands of nature, and so having that different experience and also really thinking about how we set what normal is by our experiences. And I found myself almost setting that bar so high because every day was so exciting and there were so many different things. And I wanted to make sure that I saw the grandness in those moments and never let that bar get so high that this becomes average. No, don't do that. So we realize the specialness in every moment. But that was kind of the journey of that trip. And
absolutely. Oh, I love it. And to me, we really are travelers, right? We are spiritual beings traveling, right? Our spirits are traveling in these physical beings, right? And so the adventure of traveling is every day, but somehow, like you said, we get caught in this idea, well, we're just going to be here forever doing the same rat race, right? Forever. And so the colors become less brilliant and the conversations become less risky sometimes. The physical risks become less risky, right? Because we want to keep our we want to keep ourselves kind of small because it's just ordinary, our experience. And yet every single breath, every single moment is extraordinary, something to honor and to treasure of just by being alive, right?
Yeah, the mindfulness of the moment. When you said something there about the journey and the travel.
Yeah.
And so there's 3 books that I've authored. One of them is What in the Universe Are We Doing Here? And that's really a great compilation of my experiences with people in hypnosis, where I did Michael Newton's work. He had some bestsellers years ago. And I was in his first class where we did regressional work to find out what it is that you do in that pre-humanness before you become, before your soul is somehow attracted to this physical body that is your body while you're here. And so that journey is really about how you get ready to, what are you going to do in this life? What are you going to overcome? Because that's really what this is all about. I mean, the short story is, it's not about how much money you make. It's not about any of that stuff. It's about what is it that you transcend. So there's a bigger journey, which is the most important journey. And there are many rewards with that. There's a lusciousness in every day when you understand the motivations of your life, when you understand why you do what you do, especially the things that you don't want to do, the things that are driven by ego, the things where you hurt other people, where you have repeat stress. It's really, the Groundhog's Day experience, right? Because Groundhog's Day is really a compression for those of your followers that remember this movie. This is getting older now, but it's really the compression of a life into a movie where you're meeting those same situations, those stresses. They may not look exactly the same like they did to Bill Murray, but they have the flavor and they are the tentacles of that emotional issue. And so being able to quiet your mind and to have that inward journey that you just spoke of, to really understand the motivation for each of those actions, and then decide where they come from, which ones you want to hang on to, which ones you don't. Because many of our behaviors are very rewarding, but many of them are not. So, and that, of course, is an interesting thing in the human body. And that is when we go through those things and we change them for the better. When we know the things that are coming from the ego, when we know the things that are not harmonious, it's one of my favorite words, they're not harmonious with the world and those in the world, that when that happens, if we change those to a positive way, our body lives longer. Our body is healthier. The moments of life are juicier. There's this ecstatic moment that comes more often when you're doing that work, right? So what's the flip side of that? What does the body do to kind of keep you going the good way versus the bad way? What's the downside of not working with the things that cause you stress? What's the downside of you coming up against that brick wall and not transcending it? What is it that you fear that you don't transcend through, that you don't walk into with open arms? And so it's very interesting. So epigeneticists have really shown that the number one cause of disease is stress. Number 2, is the number 2 and 3 are carcinogens and ionizing radiation. Yeah. So stress number 1. So when we get rid of the things that cause stress, we are healthier, we live longer, we live better. Our body rejuvenates itself. So guess what happens if we don't? What happens is that we get so caught up in frustrations and stress. And what does that do? The weirdest thing is that when we do things that are not harmonious and we don't resolve them, is that the DNA that our body chooses to use is a degraded state. Like it chooses the bad codes. There's lots of codes that can make the same protein. Some are really good. They're sweet. They've been cleansed by the internal workings of the cell and so on. But when we're stressed out for whatever reason, it triggers the negative processes in our DNA. Like it finds the codes that aren't so great. So, and that's what sets us up for cancer.
Well, and what's interesting about that to me in the work that I do is that it's giving voice. You talk about, and I talk about that as well as finding that inner voice. And so when we get in touch, which is that voice of the soul, the knowing part of us, when we get in touch with that and we start, and I love doing this with affirmations, I love doing this with chanting, because we are reprogramming that DNA. And so that our mind, because it gets caught up in that trap, I'm not good enough, right? I'm not this, I'm not enough, which is, you talk about in your book. And that was the whole story that I grew up with, was I'm not good enough, no matter what. And so the whole narrative plays out in our psyche, and then our cells pick up and they go, oh, she's not good enough. So we're going to do a different dance, essentially, right? We're not going to flow in harmony with what is, what that inner voice says, which of course you are love. You hold the universe, the light and the love of the universe within every cell of your being, right? But reprogramming that, yes?
I would say two perspectives is that you're touching on right now. So first thing I would say is when we, in the epigenetics world, when we say reprogramming the DNA, I would also say we're making choices of which DNA to use, which is what I was saying earlier, right? Mm-hmm. So we can use good strands, or we can use strands that have some degradative effects that don't produce as clean a, RNA and then therefore proteins as other codes that exist there. Mm-hmm. So there's that. Now, the other thing I want to say is that there isn't, in all my years of work, everything goes to just one issue. I mean, you can be betrayal, abandonment, false pride, whatever the emotional issue might be, but they all somehow boil down to not being good enough, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so first of all, everybody has not good enough.
Yeah.
How it takes its form is different. Now, I'm going to say personality has a lot to do with it. So what I see is the orange personality, because of the electromagnetic field that you give off when you have certain thoughts and certain personalities that ruminate in your body, and the pathways that your brain takes will indicate what personality you are.
Yeah.
And, there's certain personalities that have to have that struggle more. It would be the orange personality, right? Mm-hmm. So some people have it even more. And so you're engaging in that issue that you have come here to work on, right? Mm-hmm. So you're in touch with this soul existence, which is the light of the universe, love, connection, everything's good, oneness. And then the human aspect, which is our fears, not good enough, and so on. So we have both these things, but how do we get in touch with this one that is the sweetness of the soul, and having a picture of how that looks, how that soul exists in a different realm, and how it communicates with this human existence. So what's interesting whenever you do regressional work and you do hypnosis and you do any of these sorts of things, this idea that we have had many lives it always pops up. There's no escaping it. So what's interesting about that is how does the soul exist from the human body? And the interesting thing is that the human existence is really a satellite of more central existences for our soul. So in our humanness, we think that the human experience is the center, just like once upon a time, we thought the earth was the center of the universe. Yeah. It's the same model, right? So here we are, we think that the human existence is that, but it's like Pluto, it's out there.
Yeah, so, absolutely. And the sun actually, and I love that analogy, and the sun is actually the center of the being. To me, the sun is the soul, and that is the light of our being. And the other piece of it that is, to me, when you talk about these personalities, and there's other ways of interpreting that too. You know, there's the woman who wrote about being highly sensitive, right? There's certain people. So there are different ways of categorizing that. But I think what's also important is that there are shadows that keep, you know, so when we're born into that wholeness, right? I mean, before we're born, we're in that unconditional love. And I remember hearing about David White, the poet, talked about, you know, the trauma of being born, right? Like you're born and you're separated. Like I remember feeling that. I remember feeling that separation, and it was cold, and it was like, wait a second, I'm being ripped out of the wholeness of who I am. And, you know, and then on top of that, my narrative immediately started with my grandfather. I told you about that, right? And so that narrative of, okay, not being good enough was right in my face just by being who you are, right? So then from the very beginning, it was like ripping apart from that space. And so I think all human beings, the way the psyche is set up, and this to me is why archetypal psychology is so important, has been so important for my healing path, because there are certain parts already from the very beginning that we show, and we get the encouragement and the support from our families. Like, yay, oh, you can do a cartwheel. Oh, you're so good at cartwheels. You're going to do more, you know, and you find yourself doing Whitney Houston talked about that. You know, Whitney Houston, I wrote about that actually in my book, that she was this, you know, everybody in the world was worshiping her, but she struggled so much with not feeling good enough. And because she was pushed from the very beginning to sing, and all she wanted to do was play and be ordinary. She talked about it at one point. So I think the interplay of the shadow and all that goes in the shadow, because we don't have those perfect models of love, plays out, you know, quite a bit in this whole dynamic. What would you say to that?
Well, I've had many occasions to work with people that are having, often an abandonment issue is really front and center. And it's a really big thing, even to the point of where they just almost can't hold that much pain of abandonment. And the direction that sometimes they want to do is to leave the human existence, if you will, right?
Yeah. And
so when I've done some hypnosis with these people, it's very interesting. So the first trimester is the soul. I've never found a soul that embeds before that. And frankly, there's not anything to embed into it, but it's a cluster of cells. I mean, no organ is even in place. I mean, the definition of the first trimester is the creation of the shell of the spinal cord and the brain, and everything is so not there yet, not human yet. So somewhere in the second trimester is where you know the soul starts to kind of weave in and out of that body, and it still can be in that other realm, which I call the creator realm in the book, and then it really embeds. And those people, they're typically have the green personality, or they're more sensitive green orange, and they remember because they're intuitive, and they're intuitive today. They somehow remember that there was a time when they were in oneness. Oneness beyond oneness. You know, there's this Jewish word echad, which is oneness beyond oneness, right? And that they're merged, right? And so they remember that. And it hurts because they know what it's like to be held in that space that you talk about, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Kind of getting them to realize, you know, the three poisons of Buddhism are, you know, grasping, aversion, and ignorance. Ignorance being forgetting that we're a spiritual being in a human body having a spiritual experience, right? So forgetting who we really are. So trying to bring that out in the hypnosis session to see themselves as this soul that is attracted and received by the body somehow.
Mm-hmm.
And to be okay with it and to let them know that they wanted to come here to work on this issue and to like open their arms and mind to it and embrace it and then move through it and how you do that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting to connect to that and for people to get to that when they have that issue that you talked about.
Yeah.
I've seen that before.
Yeah.
The more intuitive you are, the more you know that there is an existence beyond the humanness.
Absolutely. And so here I have a challenge for you.
Yes.
A challenge. So you're definitely talking from a professional at this point with a great deal of experience. And I'm so grateful for that. So what I would love now is for you to talk from the experience of the personal, of going through that yourself, because this work came from a personal healing journey. Am I correct?
Yes, indeed.
So let's see if we can shift down a little bit deeper, because to me, the biggest healing happens when we step out of the roles of who, we've been conditioned to be or trained to be, right? I know for me, a huge healing happened when I decided, and I did it twice in my life, where I stepped out of the teacher role because I had so many people coming. I found myself as a teacher being so much an emotional rescuer for others that I was not emotionally aligning with what it was I have come here to heal. And I think that is something from the very beginning. That's how I got my identity, right? Is I was so good. I wasn't popular. I had the glasses and the braces and the bowl cut, right? So I was not popular. I didn't have the right clothes. I didn't have but people sought me out for my counsel because I observed the relationships, and I was so intuitive and so connected that I knew things that other people didn't about the relationships going on. I've always had that. Anytime I got a job, I'd start at the lowest level, and then the boss would be asking me, right, for input because I would observe the whole. So what I'd love for us to do is to peel down some of those layers and to open that heart space and connect in. And how did this come about for you personally? And starting from the beginning, in terms of that which you're talking at a professional level.
Yeah, it's interesting that there have been 2 times in my life where I've just kind of broken free of who I was, the parts that I didn't like, and really went into self-time and thinking. And, the journey of enlightenment is really what we were talking about earlier, which is to know the motivation of every one of your actions and then decide which ones you want, which ones you don't want, instead of just letting them happen, getting triggered every time, and then not knowing when they're happening, like being oblivious, right? So the first time was when I left junior high school and just didn't really like how I was trying to be popular and all that stuff. And I was like, gosh, that's just so wrong. Like, that's not what life's about. And spent like another year when I went to high school, just kind of thinking about who do I want to be? And then again, the same thing happened. I had an injury where I couldn't do the chiropractic. I treated, one of every 9 people in our town, and just loved it, knew so many people, walked around town, just felt a part of the community and so on. And then lost that and kind of shattered some things. And I was a water skier at the time and competing in the sport, and had a boat dealership that came from being sponsored and all this stuff, unimportant. But in that boat dealership, I became very competitive. I became money, or, money was important, and competition and all the things that in the real soul world don't matter, except for to overcome them. Like, that's why they're there, to overcome them, right? So I had lost my joie de vivre, and I I just ended up, one night I was there, I was working so hard. The boat dealership was wildly successful. But I knew I was killing myself. I had this, internal flash of, oh my God, I'm killing myself. So without questioning it, I knew it to be so true. I, told my partner and other people at work that I was going to sell the business and so on. And what was interesting is that this is how souls work. And this is what's so exciting, is that I found out from these dead people that, came back to life and had an experience, that our soul, and from the people in hypnosis, that our souls are working all the time to set up meetings with certain people in certain situations that help transcend us, transform us, like put it right in our face, make defining moments. You must change. And so I didn't question. And what was interesting was that 2 weeks later, I got a call from a business broker saying, I've got a guy here who wants to buy a boat business, the biggest boat business, in this area. And like, thank you, soul, for not only telling me that, but lining up somebody else who will benefit from buying this practice. And that's the way the universe works. There's many things underneath the schemes, which is what the book, Finding Peace, What in the Universe Are We Doing Here, kind of talks about a lot of those experiences. Anyway, so I sold the business and started having this inward time. I started doing my Qigong, started doing, meditation that came from that, bone cleansing, all these sorts of things. And in the meditations, all of a sudden I started having flashes, movies, if you will, of times in the past where I did something that was unharmonious. And I watched the whole scene unfold, and it was like, there it was, the movie, the exact clip of what happened. And then I guess I just sat there, and my intention was, well, okay, what do I do with that? And the answer came in the meditation, which is, it showed me going back to the person and saying, this is what I did X days ago, minutes ago, years ago, whatever. And this was my fear. That's the most important part. And then if I could do it differently today, I would do it this way. Hope you'll hear me. And it is the exposing that fear and walking into it that shows you your strength.
Absolutely.
And allows you to transcend.
Absolutely. And your vulnerability. I had somebody do that just last week to me after years of separating, and I didn't know why, and just coming full board and just like revealing that it was the fear that held her back. And and it was so powerful to witness that, and it made me reflect back and think about where do I need to do that. And I think the biggest place we need to do that is with ourselves, right?
Sure.
I mean, that to me, it's like, oh my gosh, I abandon you. I abandon you. And and this is a big aha for me, because I'm recognizing that so much of my conditioning and my unharmonious behavior,
right? Yeah.
was because I allowed what other people or how other people saw me to define and energetically separate me from the truth and the knowing of who I am. But the thing is, they don't know me, so it's not their responsibility. I mean, it's just like with our parents, when we hold them responsible for not parenting us in the way that we needed to be parented. Well, they were doing the best that they can, and they were parented in the way that they were parented. And so it did a really interesting exercise. My sister and I actually are writing a book, and it's really neat because there's it's called the Seven Sisters Way. And the Seven Sisters, the mountains there, right? And the seven chakras. And so she had this vision, which I think was so beautiful, about tying that all together but writing these kind of letters back and forth. And one of the things that we talked about, and this is very archetypal in nature, but writing letters to those parts of ourselves, those, family members that we had experiences with, right? Grandparents, mother, father figure, that kind of thing. And it was such a powerful experience, not only to write my letter, but to read my sister's letter, because her relationship with my grandfather, which is who we wrote the letter for, was so different than mine. But it provided a more whole perspective, and a transformation happened in that writing process, because we actually free ourselves, right? We do that with people on the outside, but if we can do that with parts of ourselves on the inside, that's really what's going to liberate us.
It's interesting. In hypnosis, you're trying to get to a different brainwave state.
Yes.
That opens up bigger channels, bigger awareness. So what you're doing with the letter writing, I'm sure that you had like an inward moment. You're probably on that, starting that brainwave state to a high alpha state or theta. And in hypnosis, where you're really in that, that deep theta state, there's your psyche experiences things with the same intensity as you do in, well, we'll call it waking reality. So, and sometimes in the hypnosis, when it's happening, you can actually have a dialogue with that other person, even if they're dead or whatever, because somehow you're connecting to that energy of them, right?
Yes.
That's really powerful.
Yes.
That's powerful work. But I'll tell you, just to complete the process that you asked me about earlier, is that I went through, kind of 6 months of finding people that, or any situation, whether it was that day or 6 months ago, and really practicing this idea of going back and saying, this time, these were my fears. This is what I did. If I could do it differently, that's what I'd do. Hope you'll hear me. And so 6 months after my wife at the time had really wanted me to get a freckle that was on my chest, it had grown up immensely. And she said, why don't you go get that checked out? And I was like, oh yeah, you're right. So I made an appointment with a friend who's a dermatologist, and, he took it out, and he called me 2 days later saying, I got good news and bad news. I'm like, why are you calling me 2 days after this? That doesn't sound good to me right off the bat. And he said, well, do you want the good news or the bad news? And I said, well, let's start with the bad news. And he said, well, it's melanoma that was on your chest. And I said, wait a minute, the 2% survival rate after 5 years melanoma? He's like, yeah, that melanoma. I said, okay, I'm really ready for the good news now. And he said that, that the pathologist up at Stanford, who they'd sent it to, said that it was certainly invasive at one point, but my cells had gone through lysosomal and apoptosis and so on to break down those tentacles that were from melanoma that were coming from my chest, that were, embedding who knows where, right? Because it doesn't believe in boundaries. Melanoma is just, it creeps and crawls, right? And he said that your freckle probably would have fallen off in another couple months. And he said, what did you start doing 6 months ago? And, I told him, I said, kind of a journey of reconstructing myself and, finding that place and doing the Qigong and bone cleansing, but really, asking, where is it that I need to harmonize my life? Where is it that I need to do the work? And so it reversed it. And that's what started me on this journey of helping people with cancer. And, my mom and friends, and all of a sudden, all these people started coming, some that were given 3 months to live. And, that one in particular is still living. And another one who had, brain, bone, liver, breast cancer, all, secondary to the breast cancer. She lived for another 8 years and was told she only had months to live. So, what are the emotional issues of those people, and and having them do this work, and then throwing gratitude training in there to get your mind, all these things and doing Qigong and doing bone cleansing and, really looking at life in a different way. Imperative. You got to be a different person. The person that the 3-month one that was given 3 months to live, she said to me, and this was the beauty. She said, I know I have to be a different person than the person who got or attracted cancer.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I remember reading that, and that's absolutely brilliant, because that is the energetic law of attraction, right? And that we are attracting, because we are energy, we are attracting things, like you said, at a level that is not conscious, right? That people and situations are coming to us. And I believe it's all for healing, right? It's all for healing. And so, but we don't always know why or how, or it all fits together. But if we really, and I think what happens is, again, if we go back and we listen to that, so that inner still voice, and it will give us that step. Oh, maybe you should try this. Maybe Qigong. Maybe music, singing, right? I had a gal on a podcast who healed herself. She hadn't sung her entire life, and she struggled with Crohn's disease. And then she was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and she started singing because angels came to her. And she said, I had never sung. She was 70 years old. I had never sung. And through that, and she decided not to take on the diagnosis. She decided not to believe, because she was told that she could leave, but she actually has more work to do if she wants to do it, right? And that's an interesting thing too, because I've heard that. I remember reading Anita Morjabi's book, where she had died, 4.5 years, struggled with cancer, and she'd gone to the other side, and she was, she felt, which so many people say, oh, we're going back to that unconditional love, right? So it's not so bad, right? We're being enveloped with love, and sometimes, the world itself doesn't have that, and it's hard to get connected with that. So why go back, right? Why go back? But she saw her partner, who loved her just so deeply, and her family suffering, and she chose to go back. But she went back with the awareness and the knowing that she was that love, and her whole message was to carry that. And same with you, right? Your message, the wounded healer, right, is the archetype of, I know what those wounds are, and I also have come to understand and embody the healing energy of that, right? So you have these techniques and these processes. I do the same thing in my work, but it's not really about the techniques. It's actually, to me, it's really about embodying the energy of the new you, right? The new you that you are creating. And so those are strategies. They are strategies, but really what you do is you open to receive, that to receive that transformation of energy, right? To choose those other cells, right? To visualize that. Joe Dispenza talks about that too, right? Visualizing the healing happening. I mean, there's so many different ways to do that.
It's interesting, and I'm not sure. The thing that I find interesting is that the partnership we have with our soul, right? So I'm gonna give you a secret. Don't tell too many people this. In one of the interviews with somebody who died, she was a born again Christian.
Yeah.
And she died. She came back. Don't tell anybody, okay, that she said that we already exist in what she called heaven, I call creator realm. Yeah. We exist there and here simultaneously.
Yeah.
So you don't die in return, you're already there. Yeah. It's just the television of being a human disappears. And so you're just more aware of that, because that becomes more of a central focus. And there are other realms in which our soul energy exists and experiences.
Yeah.
Can you keep that secret for me?
Yeah, I can keep that secret. Although if I keep that secret, I might end up having to reveal it someday and have to go through that whole process. But yeah, and the other thing I think that's so neat, and this kind of brings us full circle, and we may have to come to a close shortly, but we can do this again, of course. But the other thing is that it brings us back to embodying every moment, because if there is a heaven, which I believe there is, that there's that beautiful Belinda Carlisle song, "Heaven is a Place on Earth," right? And I always envision, I think this is why I love music so much, is and creating it and playing it with others, is because I love musicals, right? When everybody's singing and they're dancing through life. And to me, that's a really great example of that utopian vision of that, in even when we have conflicts, right? We're singing through those conflicts so that we can, that we can transform. But we know that we're all connected. We are totally all connected in that soul space, and that the conflicts that arise with the personalities and the ego takes the back seat to the love of who we are, the one song of love that I love to refer to.
It's so wonderful that you have that connection. It is a gift. And I'm sure that sometimes it's a hurt, that contrast between oneness and separateness, and so if you can imagine this kind of connectedness of multiple realms, of earthly existence. Let's just spend time, like everybody who's a human being, I'm told, they exist in 3 different realms. One is the humanness. And then there's this creator realm, which I believe is what people call heaven. And I veer away from heaven because even this born again Christian, when I asked her about hell, she said, no, there's none of that. That's crazy. Like, I know that's what they said, but it's not true, And so there's this creator realm. And in that realm, our souls exist and they have some free will.
Yes.
And
yes.
Just some. Yeah. Where in the humanist, we have a lot of free will to do whatever we want. So you got tons of free will, less free will. And then there's this realm in which it's the oneness beyond oneness. And that's where there's no differentiation between Emily and William and the rock and, like all that energy, because the thing it is talked about is that everything that exists is energy held in a consciousness that makes it material, right? So there's something that's holding the set together through consciousness, right? So that the movie can go on, right? So that is creation, right? So, but the other realm, that third deeper, primordial realm, is that one where there is no difference, where it is just oneness, where there is not you, it's just a thing. So, and how these all interrelate is really special. And, this is some of the things that I talk about in the book and I've learned. And it's really, it's a gift, and it's a gift to see it in someone like you who is bridging between humanness and that creator realm. And like, how do I connect those? How do I bring them a little closer? How can I talk to my soul? Because I know if I can be my soul, this whole thing just blossoms, and my soul knows that everything's okay. And I'm good enough. Like, that's not even a point of interest. Like, a soul would never even enter that conversation, right?
No,
so
absolutely
how do we break?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing, when I sit down and I do my songwriting, it's those questions that come out, am I good enough kind of thing. That comes from that shadow dark space. And always the chorus is, you are love, you are connected, and it's so certain that there is no denying it. And so, it is this dialogue that is ongoing. And the more that we unify that within ourselves, the more that I believe we can walk in the world holding that light space, and the more that it is more easily recognized, because it's the splits. And that leads to a lot of pain and separation. And I really appreciate you, because I think you have really done a lot of that integration. You really are aligned and you're living that truth, you know?
I think that you underestimate your work with this and what you'll be doing with this and the gift that you have that's going to allow you to go very far on this adventure.
Well, I thank you so much for being here. Dr. Will Mehring is my guest today on Emily Songbird. And this has been a delight, and I have a feeling that we will have more conversations. So if folks want to reach you, what is the best way for them to reach out to you? Is there a website or a...
Yes, it's Finding Peace in Chaos. And there will be the book, Finding Peace in Chaos, What in the Universe Are We Doing Here? There's also Who Knew Life Could Be This Good? Knowing Your Personality is, gives you a happier, healthier life is the subtitle. And there's lots of personality tests in there. It helps you understand what you might be need to transcend, kind of give you a focal thing. And in there's some websites or communications that can happen, and you can email me. So yeah.
Fantastic. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much again. It was such
my pleasure too.
All right, this is Emily the Songbird signing off and taking flight. Wishing you a magical and musical day.
Very good.
Did you have fun?
Yeah, sure.
Good. Okay. Well,
you're not going to let the secret out, are you?
No, I won't let the secret out. There probably aren't that many people that'll actually listen to it on my YouTube. So we have to send it out in the world if there's other people. So anyway, shifting gears, but thank you so much. That was really delightful and enlightening, and just yeah, I really appreciated our conversation, and it seems like that there's a lot to share and to talk about.
Wonderful. Well, I hope you have a great rest of the day. I'm actually going to come. My son is going to be in Santa Barbara on Sunday. So
fantastic.
He's going to be surfing in the morning. He graduated from UCSB, I think 3 years ago. Yeah. So he's meeting up a bunch of his buddies there, and they're kind of doing a little surf thing.
Oh, fun. It's supposed to be so beautiful these next couple of days.
Oh, it's so nice to see the hills. Yeah. Seven Sisters green,
Yeah.
And you come up to Los Osos, you'll really look at how beautiful it's becoming.
Absolutely.
Anyway.
All right.
A pleasure, absolute pleasure. And thank you for the opportunity to discuss and to grow and all of those things. And it's really interesting from this conversation. I really get that, your work is to help people bridge between the two realms, Yeah. And you have those tools, you have the personality for it, you have the passion for it. Yeah. And I think that's something you might want to look at if you
I'm doing it. This is how I'm doing
it. I'm saying go big.
Yeah, hey, universe sends me whatever opportunities. I mean, this is, I'm just connecting with people that bringing like-minded, like-hearted people on board and having conversation. That's what you said. Be talking, and this is what I'm talking about. I love talking about this stuff. It gives me great joy and pleasure. So yeah.
Sounds good. All right, girl.
All right.
Well, I'll talk to you later.
We'll talk soon. Bye.
Bye.